Hi there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at.
You can't provide emergency service unless you can get there.
Suburban leaders slam the merger of two rail companies as a danger to public safety.
The future of democracy amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. We're one-on-one with former U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel.
I'm totally stoked about working here.
And excitement builds for a fossil hunting expedition in the Arctic. And now our top story tonight. A new rail line linking North America is set to send more freight trains through Chicago's northwest suburbs. Federal regulators just approved a merger between Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern, with Chicago as part of the route linking Mexico, the U.S., and Canada.
The deal's backers say it'll boost competition, reduce emissions from trucks, and create jobs. But opponents in the Chicago area say the deal is dangerous. As part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series, reporter Nick Blumberg and producer Blair Paddock have been looking into this. And Nick now joins us live from Itasca. Nick.
Well, Paris, Itasca is split basically down the middle by train tracks. Now, those tracks are used by Metra's Milwaukee District West line that runs from Union Station out to Elgin, and by freight trains. Itasca's fire chief told us more than half the village lives north of the tracks, with the fire station on the south side. He's worried that more rail traffic and longer trains could have a human cost.
Okay, here we go.
Itasca Fire Chief Jack Schneidwind is taking us on a drive from the village's only fire station to a house a quarter-mile away.
Railroad tracks are right here. Nick, if you have your phone, why don't you just time us real quick?
All of the rail crossings in Itasca are at street level, so first responders have to cross the tracks to get to this part of town. As we found, it's a very short trip.
Okay, so a minute and 25 seconds. Now we'll slide back.
But if the crossings were blocked for minutes on end by a freight train?
Unfortunately, there are no good alternate routes.
Schneidwind says the only option is to go south, get on the interstate heading back north over the tracks, and then wind back south through neighborhood streets. When he showed us that route, it took us more than 11 minutes.
Time is of the essence in every emergency, so a house fire will double in size every minute. Brain cells start to die in 4 to 6 minutes.
That's why Itasca's Fire Protection District has been part of the coalition to stop CPKC, which includes DuPage County and a cluster of northwest suburban communities fighting the merger of the two rail companies, a merger that was just approved.
We feel like they didn't take people into account in this, that they took money into account.
The newly merged company plans to run an additional 7 to 8 trains each day along this section of track. Opponents warn of 2-mile-long trains blocking crossings for 10 minutes at a time. Speaking with WTTW News last year, company spokesperson Andy Cummings disputed that.
At any given crossing, you're looking at about a 3-minute crossing blockage for a 10,000-foot train moving at speed. So certainly that does have an impact. That's a 3-minute blockage. To put it in perspective, that's spread out over a 24-hour period. That's going to be about 1 minute per hour.
After the merger, Cummings told us the company's committed to an ongoing dialogue with communities along the rail line.
This really felt like a David versus Goliath battle.
Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy also opposed the merger. He notes Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern have each had trains carrying hazardous material derail over the last several years.
So if you imagine a situation where what happened in East Palestine happened in the Chicago suburbs, it would be on a scale unimaginable compared to what we saw in Ohio.
But the head of the federal agency that okayed the deal says 94% of hazardous material spills last year involved trucks, not freight trains.
It is not a problem caused or the result of this merger. In fact, to the extent hazardous materials can be moved on rail rather than on the highways, we are better off the more of that traffic that is moved to rail.
In a statement, company leaders say the deal will enhance competition, provide improved reliable rail service, take trucks off public roads, and improve rail safety. But the fear of derailment is felt even more acutely in Elgin, where the train tracks run along the Fox River.
The rivers give life. I don't meet anybody that doesn't think the river's a wonderful place. and worthy of protection.
Gary Swick says despite the safeguards in place, the increase in traffic can still create a risk.
Anytime there's more of something, it's more likely to happen.
It really makes me angry that an unelected body made this decision. I would tell them to not put industry first, not believe industry's claim that they're acting in the best interests of the citizens.
Krishnamurthy says he also takes issue with how federal regulators approached the deal.
The railroads are incredibly powerful, and they have, in my opinion, too much sway, but I'm not going to stop fighting.
So, Nick, what are the next steps for these companies and their opponents?
Well, any requests to immediately stay the Surface Transportation Board's decision are due on Monday, and any petitions calling on the board to reconsider its approval of the merger are due April 4th. Now, the company told us that it plans to close the deal April 14th. The Coalition to Stop CPKC says they're weighing their next steps here, but haven't yet decided what the best option is.
Nick, you kind of alluded to this, but train derailments and spills are top of mind for a lot of folks after what happened in East Palestine, Ohio. Remind us the issues that Illinois has had with this.
Absolutely, Paris. As our colleague Jared Rutecki reported earlier this month, there have been at least 272 incidents involving trains carrying hazardous materials here in Illinois over the last 10 years, including in two communities that are part of this anti-merger effort, Bensonville and Elgin.
All right, Nick, thank you so much. And now to some more of today's top stories. Law enforcement are hoping more money will help further tame the scourge of carjackings in Illinois.
Some of it is driven, we say gang activity sometimes, but it's often even more looser than that. It's just a social dynamic where it's like a rite of passage. And it's not even necessarily that they're making a lot of profit on it in some of these circumstances. It is just a social phenomenon, and sometimes it's even driven by social media. They're filming themselves on social media. They're putting it out on social media.
That was Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly, who says his office will be using its share of a $21 million state grant to purchase more license plate readers and planes to locate stolen cars, as well as forensic services, equipment, and canine teams. Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias is awarding the funds to 6 police organizations, including the Chicago Police Department, which will receive a $1.4 million grant. In 2022, there were 1,655 reported carjackings in Chicago, more than triple the amount in 2012.
A new report documents a disturbing rise in anti-Semitic incidents across the Midwest. The Anti-Defamation League says there were 298 such incidents reported across the Midwest last year. That's a 44% increase from 2021. Those incidents include harassment, vandalism, and assault. Now, the ADL says last year accounts for the highest level of reported incidents since it started recording them in 1978, and they say it tracks with a rise in anti-Semitism across the country.
All state-funded affordable housing units may soon be required to have functioning air conditioning. The Illinois Senate passed the measure mandating the air conditioning in response to heat-related deaths last May at a Rogers Park apartment complex. 3 people were found dead in their units in the James Snyder apartments. It was during a heat wave, and residents say managers refused to turn the air on. The legislation requires that affordable units install air conditioning and make sure residents can control it. The bill now moves to the Illinois House.
Chicagoans looking for mental health care might find it at their local library branch. The Chicago Department of Public Health is teaming up with Chicago Public Libraries to allow residents ages 13 and up to receive care regardless of insurance, immigration status, or ability to pay. The first 4 branches to provide this care on certain days of the week are located in Mount Greenwood, Beverly, Kenwood, and Edgewater. The agency says these branches were chosen because there are currently very few, if any, no-barrier mental health providers there.
A trip to O'Hare Airport will get a lot shorter for some travelers, starting in 2025. United Airlines says it's launching the first air taxi route in Chicago through a partnership with Archer Aviation. The companies say the Archer Midnight vertical takeoff aircraft will travel between O'Hare and Vertiport, Chicago in the Illinois Medical District in about 10 minutes. The rest of us know how long it takes in the car. Archer and United intend to create more routes from other communities once that one is established. No word yet on the fare for that flight.
I'll probably still be taking the blue line.
Still be taking the car.
Yeah, that's
right.
about what I can afford. All right, looks fun though. Coming up in the program, this also looks fun too. An Arctic expedition delayed due to the pandemic is back on. Paleontologist Neil Shubin gives us a sneak peek.
But first, the future of democracy amid the Russia-Ukraine war. We talk to former U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine is now more than a year old with little sign of any resolution in the near future. Meanwhile, the U.S. has supplied billions worth of military aid and supplies to help push the invading Russians back. But how much more might it take? Chuck Hagel served as the United States Secretary of Defense under the Obama administration from 2013 to 2015. He's at the University of Chicago tomorrow for a sold-out lecture on the current state of affairs in Ukraine and the future of liberal democracy. And joining us now with more on this is former U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. Secretary Hagel, thanks for being here with Chicago Tonight.
Paris, pleasure. Thank you.
It's good to talk to you again. So as we mentioned, more than a year into the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine in recent months has won back some of the territory that had been occupied. But how would you assess the situation on the ground right now?
Well, I think I'd start with this observation. This illegal massacre of innocent people, an invasion of a sovereign nation by President Putin and the Russians, is the most dangerous challenge to the global world order that we built after World War II that we've seen. That world order was based on law and order, common interests. It produced institutions like the United Nations, IMF, World Bank, trade, and not perfect, makes mistakes, can't fix all the problems. But this is what this war is really about. And if Putin is successful, it will change the entire, not only global order, not just in Europe, but in the Indo-Pacific, everywhere. And it will break that order up into a world that's very fractured, much like we saw before World War I and World War II. But this is a far more dangerous time.
And possibly a world not dependent on Western liberal democracy so much. And to that effect, you saw the meeting between Chinese President Xi and Vladimir Putin this week. Should Americans be worried about that alliance?
Well, Americans should be, and I know the Biden administration is, the Congress is, aware of that alliance. I mean, all nations always respond in their own self-interest. That's not new. That's not bad, because there's consistency to that. But when you look at those two countries, China and Russia, in many ways they need each other. They've never been close. Historically, they've never been close. They're actually enemies. But neither has allies. I mean, you think of it, where are Russia's allies? Where are China's allies? Who? Iran, North Korea, Belarus. And so these two nations, for their own interests, not necessarily for each other's interests, but for their own interests, are coming together at a time that the world is seeing this, even though China is holding back and she's not fully endorsing the invasion of Mr. Putin into Ukraine. But that's the way the world is today. And it's a world that's now totally different from what we've ever seen, because it's interconnected. We have different kinds of relationships. There's not a country in the world that's not been affected by the Ukrainian war, for example, whether it's trade, whether it's energy, whether it's diplomacy, whether it's security, whether it's relationships. Everyone is connected. And the Chinese are very smart about that. And poor Putin he's on his knees. I mean, his economy is being devastated. His military is being devastated. Still dangerous, has the most nuclear weapons of any country. So they need each other for their own reasons.
And, you know, China in the news today, the CEO of the Chinese-based phone app, TikTok, or social media app, getting a grilling, a bipartisan grilling. Folks on both sides of the aisle, including President Biden, believe that TikTok is somehow a de facto spy for the Chinese government. It can take Americans' information and transmit it to the Chinese government. Do you view TikTok and this app as a national security threat, perhaps?
Well, I think there are national security interests involved here, and there are elements of what I didn't hear the entire hearing or the president of TikTok's testimony, but I heard a lot of the questions. They were very relevant. We know that China is a master at stealing our secrets. They are a master because they control their industries, they control their countries and their companies. And so that's a threat. Now, specifically, is TikTok in that environment under the management of Chinese intelligence? I suspect some of that is true. Is it as true as many on the committee said it is? I don't know. I don't know the reality of it. But I guess the bigger point to me is where America's mind is on all of this and where our political leaders are. Very suspicious. We're in many ways off balance because of two wars that were ill-advised over the last 20 years. We lost both of them, had to get out of Afghanistan in a terrible way. The American public is really off balance about all of this. And so you start talking about TikTok spying on Americans and collecting your personal information. Well, TikTok's not the only one in social media that has that ability to sell it. And we do know that that's going on.
Any of those big social media apps have that, and folks are concerned about perhaps Elon Musk. I mean, no evidence of anything, but we're concerned about any of those apps. I want to ask you, because your speech tomorrow, or the lecture tomorrow, is with the former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, and you're talking about the future of liberal democracy. So there's a situation in Israel right now where folks are protesting what looks to be the backsliding of democracy. Prime Minister Netanyahu supporting legislation that would erode the power of the courts there, and he is facing his own corruption charges. What do you make of the situation there, and should we be concerned what's happening?
Well, I think it's very dangerous for Israel. And indirectly, it's dangerous for us because we are Israel's biggest, strongest supporter, and have been. I mean, it was Harry Truman who signed the documents that created Israel. But in that document, it also created a two-state solution. The Palestinians were to have their own country, and Israel. And what Netanyahu and his right-wing government are doing is tearing that agreement up. And Netanyahu, over the years that he's been prime minister, has done that. But now it's even more dangerous because his government is the far right. And what they're doing with trying to minimize the independence of the judiciary, not like our system, but it has been in many ways like our system, co-equal branches of government. Like we have the executive, the presidency, the Congress, and judiciary, all three co-equal branches of government. So the ramifications, consequences of what they're doing and what Netanyahu is specifically doing, I think is very dangerous and very ill-advised.
Yeah, and clearly what it appears is trying to consolidate power in the executive branch over the judiciary. Secretary Hagel.
And by the way, it's the same thing that Xi's been doing as he's consolidating power, as he takes a third term. It's never been done before in China. And he's amassing that power for himself through the Communist Party, not through the People's Republic of China and their government, but through a Communist Party and his individual power base. Putin's been doing the same thing in Russia. Now we're seeing Netanyahu do this in a very bold way. And I think part of it is because, as you've said, he's in trouble. And I think he's trying to insulate himself from those corruption charges. And they're still hanging there. I mean, there's likelihood that he could be convicted and sent to jail. So there's all of that in the mix. plus the dangerous elements that we're seeing more of. Probably it's more dangerous than we've seen in 20 years, the Middle East situation in Gaza, the West Bank, Israel. And that'll only get worse with what he's doing.
And it's combustible there right now. Well, that's what makes tomorrow's lecture at U of C all the more important, the future of liberal democracy, because in all these areas around the globe, there is a risk of this backsliding. Secretary Hagel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Paris. Pleasure.
More Chicago Tonight just ahead, so stick around.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
University of Chicago paleontologist Neil Shubin is gearing up for his latest expedition. The pandemic-delayed trip is a return to the Canadian Arctic for Shubin and an area where he made a career-defining discovery. Back in 2004, he and his team found Tiktaalik, a so-called missing link fossil of one of the first creatures to emerge from the water onto land. Chicago Tonight producer Paul Kane caught up with Shubin at his lab and began by asking him where his passion for paleontology came from.
I was always a science nerd, always. You know, I loved astronomy, geology, archaeology. This is when I was a kid in high school. And my parents fostered all my interests. They bought me a telescope when I was a kid. They put up with every hobby I had. Then when I got to college, I went to school near one of the great museums in the country, which is the American Museum of Natural History. And I volunteered there, and I got to know the paleontologists. And here I saw these people going out in the field, all these different places in the world, from South America to China to Africa, and coming back with these treasures that told us about the history of life. And I said to myself, I kind of want to learn how to do that. The whole idea is to find places around the world that have rocks of the right age and the right type to answer the question that you're interested in. And in this case, the question I was interested in was the transition from fish to land-living animal. Well, if that's your approach, it becomes this global Easter egg hunt. This is a little creature we found in Antarctica in 2019. And you can see all this white here, that's bone. So these are really cool maps. These are geological maps that are color-coded to show what kind of rocks are where, right? And so this is how we find the right places to work. So we discovered Tiktaalik rosea, the fishapod, right here in 2004. These are rocks that are about 375 million years old. It's a long time horizon to find anything in the places I work. For the Arctic, it took 6 years. And the reason for that is these fossils are relatively small, and the Arctic is a huge place. One of the great joys about doing this research is we're going to places nobody's walked before. So we find very little evidence of human impact there, which makes it really special. For me, the absolute most exciting part is dropping on a new place for the first time, seeing the rocks and trying to figure out where's the treasure going to be. For me, that's the most exciting thing. This summer, we want to go down here. We know there are fossils in these areas. These rocks are too good not to hold fossils. I'm totally stoked about working here. I mean, I wanted to be here in 2020. That was canceled. 2021, that was canceled. 2022, that was canceled. 2023, let's do this. That's kind of where we're at right now. So here in this part of the lab, as opposed to the fossil part, what we look at is DNA, and we look at embryos. And we ask the question, how does a fish, a living fish, a trout, a salmon, any fish alive today, how does a fish differ from a land-living animal, like a frog or a mouse or a bird or a human? Well, one part of the answer can go from traveling around the world and finding fossils that tell us about how that happened, the sequence of evolutionary changes from fish to land-living animal. But another approach, the approach we do in this part of the lab, is to ask the question genetically. How do the genes that build the fin of a fish differ from the genes that build the arm of a human or the wing of a bird or the limb of a frog? Those two approaches together really give us a much more complete answer than either one alone. One of the really interesting discoveries is that many of the genes that were active to build our own hands and feet are active in the fins of fish, making the terminal ends of their fins. So part of the evolution of limbs from fins didn't involve the origin of new genes. We have the same DNA. It's really using the old DNA in new ways. It's repurposing at the genetic level, which is really kind of profound.
Neil Shubin leaves for his Arctic adventure in July, should be balmy then, and will be there for a month. You can find more about his trip on our website. And we're back with a look at what's on tap for tomorrow. Stay with us. And that's our show for this Thursday night. Join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review and at 10 for Chicago Tonight. Election Day is less than 2 weeks away. Which mayoral candidate's messaging is resonating with voters?
And we fact-check plans to address the police staffing crunch facing Chicago. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.
American Masters profiles artists on the rise. Janae Bridges breaks down barriers in opera.
I am channeling every queen with this role.
While Reese Palmer carves out her own space in the country world.
I want to make music that matters.
See how they use their voices to inspire change.
It makes me feel like I'm making a difference.
On American Masters.
Friday at 8 on WTTW.
Spend Saturday evening with the Voices of Chicago. Latino voices at 6 and Black voices at 6:30. See you on Saturdays.
Next time. During a chess match, one of the competitors dies.
The lab found significant traces of poison on the White Queen.
But the team can't figure out how the killer did it.
It was locked in the case all night.
Death in Paradise.